FM News Talk 97.1. On-demand audio.
Difference between what Donald Trump says and what Donald Trump does. You know, he's bragged for months about raising $6 million for veterans and donating $1 million himself. But it took a reporter to shame him into actually making his contribution. And
Yeah, whatever, Hillary. Thank you for joining us this hour. We're going to give away a couple tickets to Boston coming up near the end of the hour, so stick around for that. That show is Friday night at the Family Arena. You know, I thought it was interesting. Nancy Cordes of CBS gave us some insight this morning onto the approach of the Clinton campaign to responding to Donald Trump. They've decided that he's such an unusual being that they can't force, I guess is another way to look at it, that they can't just attack him the way you would a normal politician with your talking points and this, that. They have to respond to something day by day. So yesterday, their attack point was veterans. He hasn't done anything for veterans. Why did they have to harass him to find out what he did with his money for veterans? Blah, 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 which is a non-issue. But there was a retired Marine who's a state representative, this Baldessaro dude. Al Baldessaro is his name. He's a New Hampshire state rep. He's also a veteran who collects money to help other veterans. And Trump called him up to the microphone to let people understand why there were veterans outside of the event for Donald Trump protesting Donald Trump, accusing him of not doing anything. And Al said, listen, I've been in this for a long time, and you need to understand what's going on outside the door. This is the guy that said,
you need to get your head out of your butt, focus on the real issues.
Thank you. That's what he said. Listen to what he said about the people who were outside protesting.
The liberal media is the only ones that have been calling me on the foundation. All right, I'm the former chairman. I've been dealing with this stuff for years as a veterans activist. Stop using veterans as political pawns. You got a guy outside McCoy. Go do a Google search on his Facebook. He's out there, his pictures with Clinton. They are using veterans as political pawns. It must stop.
I wonder, and I watch a lot of media, why in the world nobody went outside and talked to this guy who was protesting Donald Trump. He made a good point. He said, Google his name. There's pictures of him with Hillary Clinton. Of course he's going to come out and say this stuff. Folks, this is an indication of how weak they are on this issue. They can't. They have nothing else to criticize Donald Trump for except for the fact that he didn't say soon enough where he spent $6 million on vets that he collected and donated $1 million of his own money. It's just weak. It's just a weak argument. But I wanted you to hear that from the Trump vet, the vet that he had come up there and talk, because the guy was he's just a straight shooter, and it's a good thing for people to hear that. So one of the big stories that we've been following here on the show is the folks at Judicial Watch have led the way on this email situation, honestly. They've kept the pressure up through FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests, to try to get information out of Hillary Clinton and out of Hillary Clinton's campaign just to get more truth, more facts, because let's face it, Congress has been stymied at every turn. They've had documents withheld and, just a lack of forthrightness, I think, would be the best way to put that. So Judicial Watch finally goes to a judge who gets fed up and goes, you're right. I'll tell you what, why don't you subpoena all of them and get them into depositions, and let's ask them some of these key questions. So we're joined right now by Michael Bekesha with Judicial Watch, who's been one of the attorneys working on this case. And this week, or late last week, they were able to interview Cheryl Mills, who was the chief of staff for Hillary Clinton. Mr. Bekesha, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Happy that you could join us today. I get the impression from some coverage I've read about this deposition that for the most part, Cheryl Mills has some selective amnesia.
She did. She didn't remember a whole lot.
Oh, that's strange.
When it came to, what email account Mrs. Clinton was going to use, how Mrs. Clinton determined what email account, how everybody in the State Department knew what email account she was going to use. Ms. Mills didn't remember any of that.
Well, tell me what the true goal was here in these depositions. So you're going to get Cheryl Mills, maybe Huma Abedin, and some other people, including is it Patrick Kennedy that you're going to depose as well?
Yeah. So the judge authorized us to start off taking 7 depositions. So we've taken 2 so far. We took the deposition of Lou Lukens, who was a senior State Department employee in charge of the logistics for the Office of the Secretary. And then, as you said, last Friday, we deposed Ms. Mills. Later this week, we're deposing another senior official at the State Department who is the executive secretary for a period of time under Mrs. Clinton. And then on Monday, we are deposing Brian Pagliano, the alleged IT specialist that set up the server and was being paid by the Clintons personally, as well as by the State Department, to do what's been reported, managing the server. And then, as you said, Ms. Abedin and Patrick Kennedy at the end of the month. And, throughout all of these depositions, the goal is to figure out, to finally learn the truth about why Mrs. Clinton decided not to use a state.gov email account and instead use her own ClintonEmail.com server to conduct all of her official government business for 4 years. And then on top of that, how and why this was kept hidden from the public for not only those 4 years, but for 2 years after that.
Did the Inspector General's report from the State Department shed any light on what you're after?
The IG report brought out a little bit more facts about what happened when and some of the additional players that were involved, but it didn't get to the heart of the reasons why. It didn't get to the heart of the question of, how was the public misled for so long that Mrs. Clinton had this rather unusual setup to conduct official government business.
Michael Bekesha is with the Judicial Watch. The most interesting thing that I thought came out of the Inspector General's report personally was the admission that even when her private server went down or crashed on 1 or 2 occasions, she still refused to even temporarily use State Department stuff because she didn't want any of her emails to be able to be FOIA'd. So to me, that sounded like an admission of intentionally avoiding the law. Why the bigger deal hasn't been made out of that, I don't know.
Yeah, based on the IG report, we haven't seen a few of those underlying documents. We hope to see them soon in the course of this discovery and this process that the judge is allowing. But, Mrs. Clinton made some argument, it was reported in the IG report, that, she didn't want her personal stuff to be made public. Well, Mrs. Clinton knew very well that personal emails are not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. They're not subject to congressional inquiries. So she could have used the state.gov email account, and if a sporadic email, an occasional email about her yoga routines or Chelsea's wedding were somewhere, on the State Department system, those documents wouldn't have been turned over to Judicial Watch. They wouldn't have been turned over to Congress. So, that it is surprising that the media isn't reporting more about that and people aren't talking more about that because it just wasn't true, and she should have used the state.gov email account, and the State Department would have provided her one, but she chose not to.
So it's my understanding that she was surrounded by 3 attorneys who objected to just about every question that you asked. So once we clear out all of the objections, did you glean any new information at all out of Cheryl Mills?
We learned a little bit. We did learn. She confirmed. I know there were whispers and rumors, but she confirmed that the server that was used while Mrs. Clinton was Secretary of State was originally Bill Clinton's server. So that server was then transitioned into a server for Mrs. Clinton to use. Again, that raises questions about the type of security that was on the system, that was on the server. Ms. Mills also talked about that she was never properly trained or was never trained when she was at the State Department about the Freedom of Information Act, and that therefore she never thought about Mrs. Clinton's emails, never thought about how they would be subject to FOIA, how they could be searched, how they could be archived. That's surprising from such a high-level senior official that as Chief of Staff to the Secretary of State, she never thought about issues that were so basic and fundamental to her job.
Well, and it's almost more unbelievable because she served in a similar capacity for Mrs. Clinton prior to this. She's been one of her right-hand people for a long time. So even when you're in the Senate, you're subject to these same rules, correct?
Yeah, the Freedom of Information Act doesn't apply, but you have similar applications. And we also learned, Ms. Mills said that Mrs. Clinton has always had a practice of using a personal email address in her own BlackBerry. So even when Mrs. Clinton was a senator, she refused and chose not to use her Senate email account that was provided to her. And, the interesting thing about Ms. Mills is Ms. Mills was a deputy White House counsel during President Clinton's term, and part of her role there was to oversee records retention and was involved in lawsuits about emails while she was at the White House. So, she was a pro at that. She knew these issues, and you're right. It's hard to believe that she didn't think about these things. So, the two big stories are she didn't recall a lot and she didn't think about things. And, both of those are hard to believe.
Yeah, very hard to believe. Michael Bekesha with Judicial Watch. Keep up the good work. And once you get a few more of these depositions finished, including Huma Abedin, I'd love to check back in with you and just get an update on if there's any new information we've gleaned out of this.
That would be great. Always willing to come on and talk to you about these issues.
Appreciate your time. Thank you. All right, thank you. Yeah, again, check out the Judicial Watch's website because you can sign up for alerts there, and they will send out alerts as these new issues come up with this lawsuit that they've got pending to try to get to the bottom of this. Even the judge has been frustrated with how the Clinton camp has been dragging its feet. They're doing everything they can to slow this thing down. So they finally get to depose this lady. They walk in with their attorney, and she's got 3 attorneys surrounding her. And every time they ask her a question, the attorney would jump in before she could speak and say, "I object." 250 times they shouted objection to argue why Mills should not answer the question posed. When Mills finally did answer, she responded, "I don't recall," 40 different times, and "I don't know," another 182 times. So this was 6 or 7 hours of basically her not recalling anything. It's amazing. Just absolutely amazing when you're trying to cover up for somebody the size and scope of Hillary Clinton. No, that wasn't a fat joke. I just mean the fact that she's as big a political figure as she is, they're trying to cover up for her. 314-969-9797. Speaking of, I don't recall, found an interesting bit of video about Hillary Clinton saying something very similar. That and much more still to come for you here today on The Mark Cox Show. Stick around.